Welcome to Oklahoma Music Legends. I'm your host, Tommy Henshaw. In November of 2008, Claremore, Oklahoma's own Tommy Allsup, a very talented Oklahoma music maker, visited a local radio station for a sit-down interview to talk about the time he spent with rock and roll legend Buddy Holly. If you're not familiar with Tommy Allsup, let me suggest you take a listen to our podcast number 5 that's dedicated to him. This interview was lost until a short time ago. While the interviewer's questions are missing, we are sure you'll know exactly what was asked of him. We are presenting this interview in a series of 4 separate podcasts, each available one after the other. We are honored to have this recording entrusted to us and proud to bring you this very special podcast event, an historical account of the events leading up to what's been called the day the music died. We hope you enjoy the lost interview. And now for Tommy Allsup on Buddy Holly, in his own words.
Yeah, the way I met Buddy Holly, I got a call one time from Clovis, New Mexico. I was playing in a nightclub in Lawton, Oklahoma, a place called the Southern Club, and I got this call, and a guy named Jim Ed Stewart wanted to know if I'd come out and play on a session at Norman Petty's, and I said yes, I'd be glad to come out there. So I went out and we recorded a trio from Portales one night, and then Norman said, "Can you hang around tomorrow night and play with the Bowman brothers, who were on Columbia Records at the time, with the Norman Petty Trio?" And I recorded with them. And then the third night, there was a boy from Albuquerque came in, and I recorded with him. And then Buddy came back from England about that time, and he'd heard some of the stuff I'd been playing on and asked me to stay around and join him on some records, and I said I'd love to. And that's when we recorded It's So Easy. And so probably a couple of 3 weeks went by, and I came back to Oklahoma. And I got a call from Buddy, and he said, "Tommy, they're fixing to release It So Easy, and I can't play your guitar solo. Can you go on a summer tour with us?" And I said, "Yeah." So I agreed to do that. And then as we got a little more closer to the tour, he wanted to know if I could put together a dance band to record some, or to play some dance music in between the shows, which we did. And I had some guys from Oklahoma City. There's 3 horns, and it was a pretty good little blues band. And so that was the first tour, and that's how I got to meet Buddy. Then I stayed around and recorded a lot more stuff with him after that. Yeah. Then I toured again with him in the fall. After I first started recording with him, I made all of his tours after that, which was 3, and so it sounded a lot different than what he had originally sounded like. Just for that reason, because we did have the voices, and yeah, that was a big tour, that fall tour, and we did It's So Easy, and we did all of his other stuff the Roses had sang on a lot of his stuff up to that point, and it was a little different sound. It really was than the summer tour, So yeah, it was great. He was over at Clovis one afternoon. We were in the studio, and he said, "Been talking to the Everly Brothers, and I got this song I need to put down for him." And so Bo Clark was there. He was the studio drummer, and George Atwood was the studio bass player. And he asked Norman, said, "Can we get those guys to play on these songs?" And Norman said, "Yeah." So that's how that came about. They just happened to be there, and and those were demos for the Everly Brothers, but they ended up being Buddy Holly records. Yeah, Love's Made a Fool of You's been good, Yeah, we do that a lot. I have this singer with me, Johnny Rogers. He's from Chicago, and that's one of the big songs we do. We'll do that, and people say, "Man, I forgot all about that song. I love it." So that's in all of our shows. Not really, not like it was in England. England's had a better run of his records than the United States has. Kind of sad, but yeah, we talked a little bit on the tour. He said that I'm going to be moving up to New York City, and I don't know if J.I. and Joe B's going to come with me or not. He said they're thinking about staying at Norman Petty's. And at the same time, I had a Western band playing in a club in Odessa, Texas, so it didn't matter to me, whether I wasn't going to be at Petty's. I was going to be down there playing in my band. So, and he said, I'll be touring. I'll be hollering at you. So that's kind of how that started and ended up. Well, he was kind of disappointed that they didn't stay with him, because he was just wanting to improve on his music why he went to New York. And the main reason he went to New York is because that's where Maria Elena was from. And she lived up there with her aunt, and they got an apartment. And he thought he'd have a better chance with his writing, which he wrote a lot of stuff there in a short period of time. But by moving to New York, he thought he could further his career. And he was right. I think he was right in doing that, because he had done a lot from Norman Petty's studio, and it was time he wanted to make a change in his music. Yeah, he told me one time he was going to do a Christmas album with Neil Hefti, and who, by the way, we lost Neil Hefti about 2 months ago. He was a great arranger in that time period, and they were going to do a Christmas album, and they had talked about it, and they was going to call it Deck the Halls with Hefty Holly, and get both of them's name into it, and that was his first project. Yeah, he wanted to record with Ray Charles. He said, "Man, I'd love to record with Ray Charles." And, he was right on the verge of just doing some really big things. He did it because he thought he had a lot of money in Clovis in the bank, and he found out there wasn't much out there, and then he found out there wasn't any out there, and he needed money, and he was wanting to sign with Irving Fell to be his manager. And at that time, Irving Fell managed Paul Anka and Clyde McPhatter, and he owned GAC booking agency in New York, and they were booking all the rock and roll shows. So Buddy would have been like, he'd have had a manager that would have really done a lot of things with him, and I think he was looking forward to that, because they had us a European tour working, and when we were on that tour, we was going to be off a couple of weeks, and we was going to come for like 6 weeks over into Europe, and that was all working, and Buddy just thought that would be good for his career to have somebody like Irvin Fell backing him, being his manager and guiding his career, which he had done a super job at that point with Clyde McPhatter, and of course Paul Anka was just starting out, but he was also doing a good job with Paul Anka. Well, Norman was good in the studio. Norman was responsible for bringing his tapes to New York and letting people hear them, but I think Buddy probably felt like at that point Norman had done all he could do, for his career, and they were this. Buddy was wanting his money, and at that point Buddy had never written a check on his own, and Norman controlled the money, and I think Buddy was wanting to get loose from all that stuff, and I think that's one of the big reasons. Plus the fact he wanted Irvin Fell to be his manager. He didn't feel like Norman was his manager as much as his partner at that point, in his career, because it's one of them deals, we'll do everything 50-50 with Petty, and I think Buddy thought of him more as a partner than a manager, as such. He probably didn't realize it until after the fact, Probably not. Well, it was a rough winter up there, but when he called me he came down to Odessa. I was playing in a nightclub there, and he came down there the night before New Year's Eve in 1950, going into 59, and was telling me about the winter dance party, and that's when he said, "I've hired Waylon to play bass, and I need a drummer," and that's when we thought about Carl Bunch. And he had Ray Rush with him at that time, and they came in, and Moon Mulligan was playing piano there at that club with me, and Moon was Buddy's favorite piano player, and he's the guy that Jerry Lee Lewis and all them guys copied. And our drummer couldn't make it that night. He was had been in El Paso, and he was going to be late getting back. And Buddy said, "Well, I'll play drums."
This concludes part 1 of the Tommy Allsup interview series. Part 2 of 4 is available next.